Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Ray.
Thank you for joining us for this discussion, giving up your very valuable time as our
My pleasure.
subject matter, as our resident subject matter expert in all things contractor safety. I know you think this is a topic that's not normally covered sufficiently in some training and not always given the attention that it deserves. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to discuss contractor safety and the various elements of it. Um, so I know you know that contractor selection and management is very important, and that this needs to be addressed. And as I said, that contractor safety is not always given its due attention
Yeah,
when one is selecting and evaluating contractors.
yeah. I think that's entirely correct, Ray. When it comes to selecting contractors, if you look at most textbooks or courses that you attend, there's a lot of emphasis on cost, time, and quality, and quite rightly so. And your textbooks will have several pages on it. When it comes to safety, this seems to be ignored or sometimes sort of included as a subcategory somewhere else. Now, to me, it makes sense that one of the first things you need to think about, and I'm talking about site safety here, not about product safety. So this is my attention is on where the contractor is working on your site. Product safety is another matter, which deserves, I think, different discussion.
Are
Um,
we talking? Sorry, are we talking mainly about construction in this context? Or?
Construction, but not just construction. Facilities management would be another example. I
Oh,
mean, if you think of the catering contract, think of all the safety issues that there are in a kitchen.
indeed, yeah,
A kitchen
indeed,
is much
yeah.
less safe than working on a construction site in a lot of ways. And I can name about 10 different types of safety risk. So when it's important when you're appointing your catering contractor, your cleaning contractor, window cleaning, for instance, um, all of these, it's important that you get a safe contractor. And to me, it's one of the first steps you should take. They could be very good at everything else, but if they're an unsafe contractor, um, you're you're not just putting the outcome of the contract at risk. You're putting people's safety and possibly their lives at risk. So that's why I
Indeed,
think it's important. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Okay,
and
so sorry, carry on. Sorry.
I'll give you an example. Um, I'm just looking through a textbook on contract management, and there's a section on KPIs, and there's an awful lot of detail on KPIs on cost, time, and quality. When you get to safety, it covers about one subject, which is lost time accidents, as if that's the only thing that matters. Now, it is important, lost time accidents, but analyzing them is not enough to tell you that you've got a safe contractor. So I think that not only the textbook, but in um, the teaching, I think, goes a slightly different way. I happened to come across a course that was available on contractor safety, and I thought I'd look it up. And it's all about your legal responsibilities and compliance. Now, that
Uh-huh.
is extremely important. I don't discount that in any way. But again, to me, that is not enough. To say you comply with the law is not enough. Use sustainability as a sort of comparison. To say you comply with the law on let's say, the Environmental Protection Act does not necessarily make you a sustainable company.
No.
So that's why I think it's important we go beyond what the law says and say, I think safety throughout the contract process is just as important as any other of the key aspects.
So I guess what you're saying is that you think in the current teaching training, not enough attention is given to contractor safety.
Exactly that. Yes, that's right. Yes. So say too much emphasis on compliance, accident statistics, and the other area I did mention is health and safety policies. Again, no disagreement with the need for a health and safety policy. But let me give you an example. I sometimes ask my students, what do you do with a health and safety policy when you get one? Let's say you're doing a sub-supplier selection and you've asked for copies of policies. They're a quality policy, that's sustainable, and a health and safety policy. What do you do with it? Yeah, because at the end, if you do nothing with it, why bother to ask for it? And the answer is usually we file it, or we put a tick to say it's been submitted, or we pass it to the health and safety section. What do they do with it? Oh, well, they have a look at it and tell us whether they think it's a safe company or not, or against what criteria, or don't know. So, so looking at all of that makes me very worried that people think that they're covering it well, but they're not really.
No, but I mean you know, you and I have a lot of experience in selecting contractors, and often the
Yes.
companies they send out bits of paper and people tick boxes, but really we've got no idea whether they're actually capable or able to do the things that they say.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Ray.
It's just relying on the due diligence that we've covered ourselves by ticking. You know, we have a tick in the box.
Yeah.
They have a health and safety policy.
Yeah.
Therefore, de facto, they must be safe. Tick in
Yeah,
box.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you think should be emphasised then in
Right.
training? If we were putting together a training program for this topic,
Right.
which I know that we'd like to do. So
Yeah.
you need your advice on that.
Yeah.
What should go in? What should be
Right.
what
I
should
think
be
there's two elements to this. I think there's what I call the strategic element. The strategic element is understanding, firstly, as a customer, your responsibility. Particularly in the United Kingdom under the Health and Safety at Work Act, there's this feeling that if you employ a contractor, the contractor is the only party responsible. Now, if there is an incident, that's correct. The contractor is the first line of responsibility, but the law is very clear that anybody working at your site, or the words in the legislation are undertaking, that you have a responsibility for their health and safety. And this is backed up by two very important pieces of case law, Associated Octal and Port of Ramsgate, which anybody listening can look up and will find in a lot of detail where there was an accident involving the contractor, but the client was also found culpable, and both cases fined large sums of money. Though in the case of Port of Ramsgate, the client was not British and refused to turn up for the hearing and refused to pay the fine. But so that's about the law, but it's more than about just the law. It's also about the practice as well. So I think strategically, companies have got to think to themselves, I'm getting a contractor on site. What do I need to do to make sure, A, I comply with the law, but I think more importantly, ensure that people working for the contract and ensure my own people are working safely. So that I think is the strategic thought we need to put together. Yeah. Now,
I'm
when
interested.
Carry
I'm
on.
Interested in how one deals with the issue of contractors and subcontractors. Are they the responsibility of the contractor to make sure that they're working safe, or they
first responsibility? Yeah. I mean, contractually, obviously, yes, for the concept of privity, but also in law, but the client cannot write into the contract and say the contractor shall be responsible for all matters of safety when working on our site, because that would deem to be an unfair contractor, almost certainly, because it's unreasonable. Now, the degree of responsibility depends on who you are as a client. If it's you as your private house owner, you have probably very little or no responsibility because you're relying on the capability of your contractor. But if you're a very large company, you cannot say, oh, we devolved all responsibility to our contractors. We don't understand it, even though we've got multi-million-pound turnover. That will not wash, and it did not wash in the case of Associated Octal and Port of Ramsgate.
I mean, Octal one was where the contractors were working on site and they weren't using incorrect lighting, if I remember
That's rightly. Correct, yeah.
And there was some kind of fire. And
it exploded and a guy was badly burnt. It's a bit historical now because the product that the contractor, well, the product that was made by the client, sorry, not the contractor was cleaning out tanks for a product which was used to stop the knocking noises in petrol when you use 4-star. So obviously the concept is a bit out of date, but the judgment to me still applies very much to do. So I think you've got to think strategically that how responsible am I for safety? So you've got to do your risk. What could go wrong? And I think in order to discharge that responsibilities, I think there are 3 key duties. There may be other, but there's 3. One of which you'll know very well is selecting a safe contractor to go on your tender list.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
one of Carter's 10 C's, of course, under clean.
I'm
Now,
glad you brought that up.
yes. So this isn't just about statistics, so they might be important. So the accident rate is important, but the accident rate doesn't tell you why. And in fact, it might be. And if you remember in the old EU legislation, the concept of cleanup, i.e., if you've committed an offence, you can make yourself better by saying you've cleaned up, i.e., you've put in processes in place to stop it happening again. I mean, a good friend of mine says people talk about the accident and are most interested in health and safety 1 minute after the accident has happened.
Yeah.
So it's not just statistics, but also look at their processes. So, for example, it could be, are they accredited to ISO 45001, the health and safety standard? Or do they use a scheme within their industry? So an example in construction is passport, or there's qualifications like NEBOSH as well. But go further than that, you need evidence that they've got safe systems of work. Now, these standards may be a good starting point, but they may not necessarily be sufficient. So don't just look at the statistics, look at the systems. What do they do to reduce safety risk? So do they do, for example, what do they do in the way of risk assessment? So get copies. What do they do in the way of joints, of safety inspections, for example? Look at all of that. Now, the chances are, if they've got accreditation, they may or may not do that well. But you know, I think yourself, Ray, with ISO 9001 on quality management, it's a good start, but it may not be sufficient. And you may need to ask other questions. I think here So basically, when you got to the end of this process, when you've done your Carter's 10 Cs, you should be able to say, I believe I can sleep at night and appoint this contractor if they come up with the best bid. I have done everything possible to ensure they are competent, including safety, environment, and financial as well. It's interesting when I ask my students to come up with things you need to look at to put on a tender list, finance always comes first. Are they financially safe? Which is fair, fair enough. I wouldn't disagree with that. And technical, are they capable? Nobody, unless they work possibly in construction or nuclear, ever comes up with safety. I have to prompt them, which worries me slightly. So that I think is the first duty. The second duty is ensuring that the contractor you're going to appoint has a safe system of work. So that's not just about, are they a safe company, but have they proposed a system of work that is safe to carry out the objectives of that particular contract? So let me take a silly example. Not necessarily. Do you remember Fred Dibner? He used to do work on chimneys, didn't he?
Oh yes, yes.
Steeplejack. Do you remember Steeplejack? That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. Do you remember his system of work? Or when he was he would climb up and stand on top of the chimney with no harness, no scaffolding or anything. Now, it was good fun to watch them, but there's no way we'd tolerate that. So when let's say we're going out to tender for chimney cleaning or something like that, if it still exists, we want to know is the contractor or potential contractor, I should say, going to put in place in order that there's a safe system of work, that they can carry out the work that we specify safely, but also in accordance with our own safety requirements, because we will have defined safety and we will have needed to communicate to the contractor the risks of working on our particular site that they may not be aware of.
Is that like a risk? Is that like a risk assessment?
Yes, it would be a risk assessment. Now, to me, the best thing is what I would do is I would include in the invitation to tender a risk assessment of our particular safety risks. And if it's construction, I believe you have to do so by law in the UK. But I would also ask the contractor to highlight risks that they know of that we haven't thought of or weren't aware of, because we appoint contractors. We're not necessarily expert in what a contractor can do, are we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if you bring in a contractor to clean a chimney, your job is to produce something that causes smoke to go up the chimney. You're not necessarily an expert in cleaning. And And that was the same with Associated Octal. They were experts in producing this additive for petrol, not for cleaning out tanks.
But that wasn't reason for them to be left off the hook, was it? The fact they
No,
didn't know,
that's right. That
they still
wasn't
had,
enough. They
that
argued
wasn't
that.
enough.
They
Yeah.
said they'd appointed a competent contractor, but they missed out what I believe is the third bit, which is once you've appointed the contractor, and this is where I think there can be a failing, ensuring the contractor works to the system that has been agreed. I.e., you can't say, well, I've done all my due diligence. It's a safe contractor. We've devised a safe system. It's all written down. Now let them get on with it. And that's what happened because the contractor didn't use a safe system of work. They used a very poor form of lighting. The bulb cracked and caused an explosion in the tank because obviously there's still gases left in the tank that they were cleaning out. So what's the way around that? What you should have is not 100% inspection, unless it's very rare. You don't want to stand there watching the contractor. So all you get is a poor job done, well supervised. What you want is a toolbox of various mechanisms that you could use. So, for an example, would be to use the word a toolbox talk. Not to hold a toolbox talk, but to evidence yourself at the supplier's toolbox talks. Now, those who are not familiar with the phrase, a toolbox talk is rather an old phrase, where a supervisor would talk to the staff, let's say for about half an hour, on a particular safety matter that was relevant to the job in hand. So if we go back to Associated Octal, the toolbox talk might be about making sure you use safe systems of lighting when carrying out cleaning in a tank which may have gaseous remains in it.
Yep.
Audits, but not just getting the supplier to do their own audit. Do joint inspection audits. Do audits of safety which are announced, unannounced. Do observations. Just watch somebody for 15 minutes. That will tell you an awful lot. Have safety as a top priority at your progress meetings, or have separate safety meetings. And of course, when you get to the end of the contract, don't just talk about did they do the job on time or did they do a good talk about what can we improve with regard to safety. Were there near misses or were there actual accidents? Is there something we could do that next time we could help ourselves, and of course just as importantly help the rest of the world? I think.
What's your thoughts on incentives? Contractors earning bonuses and extra payments?
Definitely not. Well,
I was going to say,
let me qualify that. To me, there are two types of. We talk about contractor KPIs on safety.
Mm-hmm.
An incentive on results. No, you do not want to incentivize contractors on results. I.e., we'll pay you money if you only injure less than a few people. Or we'll pay you money if you don't kill anybody. No, that is completely wrong. That should not be down to money. That should be a value.
Yeah.
Or in your own sort of words, Ray, shared vision.
Yeah.
However, I would on input, i.e., we could pay them for what they are doing to make safety a lesser risk. So, for example, we could have a KPI. It says something like you will hold in conjunction with the customer at least 2 joint safety inspections per month. And if they do that, and the results of the safety inspection are above a certain percentage, however it's measured, then there might be some sort of bonus scheme. So I qualify my statement earlier, but I do not want to see bonuses for people who have performed well and have not injured very many people.
I mean, I was working overseas, and there was a big on a refinery, and there was a big sign saying we've had no lost time incidents in the last 2 years, and people walk around with bandages on crutches. Because if they reported it, I mean, their excuse was I did this at home because they didn't want to lose.
That's right.
The bonus that the company would get.
The other thing that happens, and this is in my experience, is that they're put on what's known as, I'll put this in inverted commas, light duties. I.e., they're not fit to work, but they're brought into the office and they don't have to do anything. Therefore, don't come up on the statistics.
People being pushed in on gurneys with drips on, just anything to save the.
Yeah, a bit like those MPs that get brought into Parliament, which are
Yeah,
very sick but are needed in order for the
make,
vote.
make a
So
vote.
yeah, so no, I would to sum it up, I would put incentives on not what they achieve but what they do. So what has
The
the
process
contractor
rather
done
than
to
the outcome.
reduce safety? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes, input rather than output type KPIs, I believe there. Yeah.
Okay, so what's your thoughts on training? Again, if we're going to be developing this course
Yeah.
on
I,
contractor safety, particularly, what would you be putting
Right. I think
in
there's
it?
two. One is you could have a bespoke course on, say, contractor safety training, which would touch upon the law, but would not be about how you comply with the Health and Safety at Work Act. Yeah, we're talking in the UK here, of course. So this would be an instance where you would go through all the aspects that you need to cover in my three stages, and you would refer to the law at each of them. And I would certainly refer to the two cases, Associated Octal and Port of Ramsgate, and there may be more modern cases as well, which sort of develop what's gone on those two. But those were always the landmark cases,
Landmark cases,
and say not just how do you comply with the law, but what do you learn in order to make work. The contractor working on site more safe for themselves and for you. So that might be a bespoke course, but also I would give it greater emphasis in any course on contractor selection, contractor management. To me, safety should be the equal of cost, time, and quality, and of course, sustainability, or in the more modern sort of part, ESG. And I think if that were done, I think there'd be a greater sort of realization that you perhaps need to do just that little bit more. And I'm not saying a lot of some companies will do this very well, but my experience when talking to when I've done courses, some for you on contractor selection and management, this seems to be very lightly covered, and students it doesn't sort of spring into their mind. Where to me, when you're going through the contract process, safety should spring into your mind straight away. Because I think, as I said before, if you appoint an unsafe contractor, you are putting people's livelihoods and possibly their lives at risk. It is not just a contract fails because it's late, we're going to lose a lot of money. Somebody could lose a life. So as you say, I'm quite keen on giving this a higher profile, both in the courses and in the textbooks as well.
Okay, well, that's very interesting, Alan.
Yeah.
And I think we need to look at this as a
Yeah.
topic. I think we'll get our heads together, perhaps, and put something down and
Okay. Yeah.
put some points down, and we'll get some publicity organised. But anyway,
Yeah.
in the meantime, thank you very much for your
Yeah.
invaluable time and your
That's right.
expertise.
My pleasure. Always good to talk to you, Ray.
And to talk to you, Alan.